Welcome to the Resolution Room, a space for reflection and meaningful dialogue. I'm Dr. Nashay Lowe. My work sits at the intersection of leadership, communication, and conflict transformation, helping people see challenge as a teacher, not a threat. Each episode invites you to look closer, think deeper, and lead with greater intention. Because resolution isn't the absence of difficulty, it's learning to move through it on purpose. Let's get into it. Every film begins with a story, and so does every company. In this cinematic conversation, I sit down with filmmaker and creative strategist Cherise Lesesne to explore how storytelling and direction can transform the way we lead. From defining a clear vision to casting the right team and setting the emotional tone, Cherise unpacks how the best directors and leaders bring stories to life that people actually want to be a part of. Together, we reveal how creativity, clarity, and compassion can reshape the cultures we build one scene at a time. All right, Cherise, can you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I am Cherise Lesesne, and by day, I am a product strategist who works in education technology. And by night, I am a filmmaker and writer and cultural strategist. And I have been in the ed tech space for over 10 years now and have been writing pretty much all my life. Since I was like a little girl, I would love writing and reading to my stuffed animal short stories. And so that just kind of carried on throughout the rest of my life. And I tried to formalize it. So, here we are trying to act out my creative ambitions and also, of course, my love for education.
That's adorable. I love that. It makes me think as a kid too. I used to do this thing where I would like sit at my grandma's coffee table and get like a stack of papers and scribble on them or pretend like I was a reporter, like stack the papers and stuff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then I went to journalism and then found out it wasn't for me. But the point is I followed the childhood dream too.
No, totally. I actually, right when I graduated college, I started doing freelance journalism and then realized that, oh, wait, I kind of need a 9 to 5 because I need some health benefits. I need to get some structure in here. So, yes.
Yeah, it's a rough world. So you've developed such a creative lens for leadership, one that mirrors the world of filmmaking. So can you walk us through your lead like a director framework and how it helps leaders think differently about the stories they're telling through their work?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, one of the things that I love to do and notice and watch film directors on set is that every single move that they make is intentional, right? You start before you get on set with a clear story of where you're going. You work with your writer to say, this is exactly the story that I want to come through. These are the characters that I want to bring about this story. As a director, you're constantly thinking about things like lighting and like sound to like really bring out emotion and tone. And that's exactly what leaders do. They don't realize that they're doing that, but that is your role, is that you are inspiring. And essentially you're gifted, you're charged with this goal or vision that your organization is trying to execute and act out. And that is your storyline. So then all of the pieces around who your team is, what everyone's role is, and what you're trying to inspire with like getting this mission is what a director does. It's like thinking about, how do I want my team to feel? Do I want them to feel inspired? There might be moments when you want them to kind of feel a little bit like not stressed, but motivated to solve this very challenging issue, or you want them to feel like empowered to make decisions. All of that is intentional choices, right? That directors are constantly thinking through in every plot point. And that's what leaders are doing. They just didn't really talk about it in that way. So that's kind of what my framework thinks about. Yeah.
I love that. And so was there a specific moment that kind of struck the chord for you that you saw the overlap between filmmaking and leadership? Like what made you create this framework?
Yeah, yeah. I remember being in one meeting in my day job where they were grappling with this whole idea when like technology was really picking up before AI became like this hot and new thing. We were in a meeting thinking about like, how does what we do stay relevant? Because education was changing where like we had less students going to college, less students going to these like traditional career paths. And it really challenged the way that the products that we were selling. And I remember being in a meeting and everyone was going down this rabbit hole of like, well, we should build this and we should build that. And no one was really clear about like where we wanted to go and what problem we wanted to solve. And I remember being like aggravated because I felt like we spent, hours in this meeting just like wasting ideas almost. And I remember calling a friend and I was like, we've completely lost the plot. And I remember saying that specifically. And like, I was just using it in a cliched like way. But then when I started to explain my frustration, I was like, I don't feel like we're clear on what our mission is, right? Like, I feel like our storyline truly is that, yes, we're getting students ready for college. Yes, we're getting students ready for careers, but really it's ultimately like getting them ready for life. And college and careers are like the incremental steps to get them to solve whatever problem they're, passionate about in life. And that's what makes you relevant. Like how you do that, right? That will come out in like getting really crisp about what's the resolution from your story, like where do you want to land? And so that's when I thought like, you know what? I feel like if this meeting and if we as leaders are to think about whatever it is that we're tasked with these very intentional points, what are our plot points? What are our problems? Where's our resolution? And then how does every single team member bring that about in their role? Like that is a story, right? That's what it is. And so that's kind of what inspired me there.
That's awesome. I love it. So let's go through each section of your framework like one step at a time. So starting with defining the story. So every great story, like you said, begins with an inciting incident, like a sort of catalyst for change, if you will. So what was yours? You kind of talked a little bit about that moment, but what moment defined the why again behind your leadership?
Yeah. So I realized really quickly when I was that aggravated over a call that the way that I think is naturally in storytelling. I think that even when I describe these pieces, it's because all of the work that I do at night after work and trying to create films and thinking about plot points naturally brings about these decisions around what lighting I want to use and how characters have chemistry together, etc. And so I realized that I was like, oh, wait, I am a storyteller, but I also have this like task of being a leader. And I tend to be the person that people come to at my job for complex problems if they want to vent or just like, I'm stuck. What do I do here? And I play this role of consultant, but in order to like inspire people to get change, it's like taking them through this story. And I was like, this is my calling. Like it comes naturally to me to like tell these stories. And that's what kind of leader I want to be. And I know that other people have this skill set too. So it's just framing it in this way of trying to think about their leadership as not this complex, like big thing that it doesn't have to be super complex, but really is like, what's the story that you're driving? And so it just happened hand in hand that my day job and my night job blended together.
Yeah. And so thinking about building the pieces of that story in your framework, you talked about how language is sort of like the leader's script. So how do the words we use in meetings or memos shape the emotional tone of a team?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think language is strong, right? I think you could use very harsh language to really like incite, to be abrasive and to be, abrupt, right? I think about like when a director is on set, they don't just say like action, here you go, right? Like there is like this moment where they're actually like pep talking with some of the actors on set to say, oh, we're building something beautiful or we're building something iconic. There is these moments where you're trying to inspire, creation and hopefully people will buy into that with the language. Similarly, as a leader at work, you're not like, oh, we're behind on schedule. It's like, we have an opportunity to change this. We have an opportunity to like tackle this challenge. And it becomes a lot more collaborative as opposed to like accusatory that like, oh, you did something wrong and now we're behind. It's like, no, we all have this challenge that we are tasked to solve. And like, that is what our role is. That's what our purpose is. And so I think when leaders can think about what's the tone that you're setting, be very strategic in the language. It's not that you're like, there are moments when maybe it's necessary to be a little bit more assertive, right? But I think most of the times as a leader, you're trying to inspire and influence your team to like bring this action about. And so being very intentional about the moments that you want and the emotions, depending on where you are in your project, about how you want people to feel.
Absolutely. I love that. And communication, again, is just that severely underrated skill, I think, just as human beings that we need to build up, especially in leadership. I talk a lot about, a lot of times people in management positions are assumed to be good leaders because they're in a high ranking position. But the reality is people tend to naturally evolve up the food chain without ever properly receiving those skills.
Right.
And when I'm thinking about filmmaking, one thing that I love movies, by the way. So I watch probably way too much TV and too many movies. But I think about distinct directors. Like, for example, like I kind of feel like you like Quentin Tarantino style or you like Spike Lee style. And when you see a movie without even reading the credits, you know who directed this movie, like this unique style. Odd, informal question, but I guess like how does that fit into communication styles and director styles?
Yeah, that's a great one. I love that you brought out like Spike Lee because I think Spike Lee brings this like very like nostalgic feel that he
Hmm.
wants people to get that. He wants people to feel like this is like an old jazz club that he's bringing about, right? And that's intentional. And the music that he chooses, right? Like in the way that he does the lighting, it's kind of like a black and white and a gradient. And he does that because he wants to be branded as like typically he wants people of color usually to feel this nostalgic moment and to also it like a lot of his plots are inspirational, right? And I think the same is true. Christopher Nolan is also a really one of my favorite directors. He
I
just
love Chris Nolan.
I love his Batman series. I love Inception. And he has a really great way of bringing non-linear stories together, right? Like he takes these complex plot points and just somehow, and it is known for like 2-3 hour films, right? Like, and just brings all of these complexities together in a way that we're not used to seeing storytelling. And that's how he brands himself. And people, you either love him or you hate him, and you go to him for that. And I think as a leader, like it's understanding one, your strengths, but also realizing like, what do I want people to think of me as? Like there are some leaders who, like for me, I want to be thought of as the creative problem solver. The reason why I even have these photos, which is like my camera for work and the background for work when I'm on Zoom calls, is I want people to see that like, yes, there is an artistry behind me. It's also calm. It's not super bold. It's just that I am the person you come to for creative problem solving. I don't want to be accusatory. I don't need to be overly aggressive, but that is my branding. Similarly, like if you want to be an empathetic leader or an inspirational leader, or maybe you're more of a militant leader, there are folks like that where it's like being really clear on who you are and what is it that you want people to feel when they're around you and they're following you. And so I think that's your brand as the leader and director.
Hmm. If your organization were a film, what genre would it be right now, and what would you want it to become?
So every day it feels like an adventure and a thriller all together. I don't want it to feel that way. I think we really probably are more in like a documentary, but I don't want us to be a documentary. I think we focus a little bit too much on what the facts are and as opposed to thinking about like what we can evolve to be. And so I want us to feel more like an inspirational story. I think about the movie like Aquila and the Bee. And
Mm.
it's this like drama, but also this inspirational drama that starts out as she faces a series of issues. She's trying to win this bee. She goes through a couple of challenges and then ultimately like she wins and she conquers and she kind of believes in herself. And so that is it's more of like coming of age too, right? But like that's the genre I want us to be. Like yes, it's a drama, but is it's this inspirational drama where as an organization, you're faced with a challenge and I want to be inspiring the people who use our products or who engage with our company to feel inspired when they come there. So
Yeah, I love that. And it's about reshaping or reimagining the way you just kind of look at conflict in the first place and what it means. I think, conflict in itself can be a loaded word, of course, but our relationship to it is very distorted. I think our natural response is to be avoidant. So it sounds like your approach is about changing that.
yeah, I think people are like fearful of conflict, but conflict is like the thing that inspires us to be better, right? Like it's like conflict signals something is not going right. So let's fix this. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about the cast and casting the right characters.
Yeah.
So in filmmaking, chemistry between cast members can make or break a story. So how does that translate to building effective teams?
Absolutely. So I feel like chemistry is one that people misinterpret. I feel like sometimes people assume that chemistry is like, oh, people just getting along, right? And so when directors cast people like in a romantic comedy, for instance, or romantic drama, typically they look for the lead actors in the couple to actually have a little bit of tension, right? Because the tension represents a normal fight in a relationship. And usually in a relationship, everything is not rainbows and butterflies, right? Like you deal with a series of issues of just, pairing together in everyday life. And I think the same is true in organizations is that you don't pair two people who are exactly alike who get along at every single moment. It's really like there should be tension and like a healthy tension of there's diversity of thought. They shouldn't be approaching problems in the same way because ultimately everyone's playing a different role and those roles should balance each other, right? Like you might have someone who's super type A and they're like, I am very task oriented. I have my planner, my calendar, and that's great. They're going to be the people to make sure the project moves along, right? Then you're going to have your like type B people who are a little bit more leisurely, social, but creative problem solvers who are like, they don't worry about anything because they have the confidence that in an agile world, they'll figure it out, right? Those two are necessary, right? They may actually clash initially because like they don't get each other, right? But like you need both of them because you need someone to move the project along, but you also need someone to be a little bit more calm and ready to like adjust at any moment. And so I think that when leaders think about that, don't always pick someone who you get along with per se, but where are the areas that you may lack or there are gaps in you so that you can really build a fulfilling team, or else you're going to like repeat the problems that you yourself have. We're all not perfect, right? Like we all have our flaws. And if you hire someone who's just like you, they're going to repeat your same flaws, right? Without you even knowing it. So
absolutely. So is this what you're talking about when you discuss like casting for complexity, not comfort?
absolutely. So I think like, the idea of casting or hiring for comfort is like hiring someone who it's like, oh, I can be best friends with, or oh, I know that they'll make me comfortable. I can talk to them and be vulnerable with them, right? Especially if you're a leader, because sometimes you do have to have tough conversations with your team members. But really, it's like, I need this team to be so complex because we're going to face, complex issues. And everybody has to play this different role. And it's really like you're not casting your friends, you're casting the skill sets that you need to like bring this project about. And I see that happen oftentimes a lot in leaders where they want to build their cabinets around people who that they can like trust. But it really is like your cabinet and the people around you are building again the gaps that you may have or the skill sets that you know that you need to like move this project forward. Don't worry about the getting along. You will naturally get along or figure out your chemistry by collaborating on a shared mission and vision. That's what you all share. That is the trust, right? And so I think that's where, a lot of leaders get it wrong. But I think directors know well that I'm not hiring my friends. I'm hiring someone who I know can play this role really well, right?
I love that. It just brings up such an interesting point that I think happens across industry sectors. It could be any kind of relationship, really, where it's the line of groupthink crossing that. Like, when you're constantly surrounding yourself by others who are just like you or share similar ideologies or whatever that is, of course, it's a comfort that you have in being around like-minded individuals and you seek that in a community. However, everything you just said, we still kind of need that friction as human beings to evolve and grow.
Absolutely.
It's such an interesting, there's not even a questionnaire here, just reflecting. Like, I just think that it's such an interesting balance to navigate as a human being to where we all like to think we're open-minded, right?
Yeah.
But it's not until you're actually challenged with someone who truly thinks differently than you that you put that to the test.
100%, right? Even in your own like partnerships, right? You wouldn't pick a partner who's just like you. You pick your partner who like complements you really well, right?
And it's so interesting. So, how can leaders cultivate character development? So, helping their people grow rather than just perform a role.
Yeah. So I think like I'm gonna liken this to a really good series that I watch, which is George R. R. Martin's Game of Thrones, right? Everybody loved it on HBO. It was a huge hit. And one of the things he would always say is that he worked alongside his directors. He was the main director, but like he cast the character Daenerys Targaryen, who as a really just amateur young girl. And that was intentional because her character arc in that series was that she was starting out as a young 13-year-old who inherited power, but also like had eventually her end goal was going to be like taking the role of the queen. And so he intentionally said, I want someone who actually doesn't have a lot of experience because I want to see them naturally grow in front of the camera, which I thought was beautiful. And I think the same thing happens with your team is that when you're hiring and you're trying to develop a character or your team, it's like taking a look at where does your team start? You might have an early career teammate where maybe they lack a little bit of confidence, and of course they like come with like little to no experience, right? So I think the approach there is going to feel really different from the approach where someone's a little bit more experienced, right? You might give your early career teammate a stretch project that one sets the goal of like, here's what we're trying to accomplish. I want you to struggle a little bit because I want you to, in some cases, you're going to get some things wrong, but those wrongs are going to teach you how to get the confidence and it's going to teach you how to problem solve. And that's what you need is like a little bit more confidence and the experience of almost like getting it wrong to figure it out to be right. Whereas like conversely, I might have someone who is really confident, but maybe they are lacking in a certain skill set that they need to acquire. I see this a lot with like individual contributors who then get promoted to managers. They're like, oh my goodness, I can, there's this assumption that because they contribute really well, they're high performers individually, that they're naturally going to be good leaders. That's just not true, right? Like the role of a leader is not for you to contribute to a task that you're inspiring and influencing. So your role becomes more of a like, you're not doing the project, you are coaching your team to do the project, right? And so it's thinking about where people start and where you want to see them end, and how are you giving them either like the scaffolds or being clear about the role that I want to see you grow into so that you can kind of like see your own character arc there as well.
I've seen lately, and I'm curious if you've seen this too. I think more companies are starting to slightly shift the approach in hiring, where it's not so heavy on the technical skill basis, and they're starting to hire more for character and personality, and you realize everything else is trainable.
Yeah, I agree. And I think like we're going to see that more with AI, where AI is going to kind of take over some of those skills we have been like traditionally trained to do. And it's going to be more about like working with people and getting people to like move the work forward. So if you don't have those people skills, that's where you're going to struggle the most because like a lot of these like small mundane things are going to get taken over eventually by technology in a sense.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little about setting the tone and visual language. So you talk about tone as a director's invisible tool. So what's the leadership equivalent of lighting or framing?
So I think in a director's toolbox, the lighting, right, is something that you would do to like invoke a certain emotion. So I might use green if I want people to feel like envious, or sometimes green is a symbolic of a new journey or a new beginning. Blue, right, might be this sense of calm or like humility almost. And so I think for a leader, the way that you're going to use the lighting or the coloring or the framing, first we'll talk about coloring, where I think let's say you're creating a memo or you're creating a PowerPoint. And I actually had this happen recently where we had like 3 months to come up with a pilot where traditionally like our competitors spend like years coming out with like pilots and things. And so in order to get the team on board, I was like, I want people to feel ignited, but I also don't want to stress them out too much. So I chose to use actually like the color yellow in a lot of my backgrounds and different gradients because I was like, I want you to feel so energized, but not bold enough where I use red and you're kind of like intimidated by how strong and stark this is because it's already a stressful project. You have a limited timeline, right? And then what I do sometimes, even in my emails, is like when I need people to feel a little bit more calm and confident, but also I want them to like pay attention, I'll use blue to just calm them down a little bit and highlight words in blue, etc. So I think the same can be true, right, with any leader, whatever it is that you're trying to invoke, and like how you're framing the problem about like this is an opportunity or a business challenge, or this is the plot that we're trying to accomplish together, really like galvanizes people to feel a part of something as opposed to like stressed out by something, if that's how you want them to feel.
I like that. It makes me think, just the coloring part makes me think of, how different brands use it, especially like in the food industry. I heard about yellow and orange and red. Why isn't so many logos? I never thought about it, but I still don't know. I mean, I don't know if I feel hungrier when I see yellow, but I mean, when I do see McDonald's, though, my mouth does water for the fries.
There's a psychology behind that, I promise.
Wow, it's so funny. So when we think about reframing, what's one way leaders can reframe how they present challenges to turn fear into focus?
I think a lot of people have this natural inclination to let anxiety take over and they're like, we need to do this. And like when you don't slow down and think about what you're trying to say, you tend to like push this very like abrasive message to your team that you probably don't even realize that you're doing. And so I think what you really want to do, like let's say there is a fear of accomplishing something on a deadline. Instead of saying we need to do this by this time, it's like we have this opportunity to solve this in this time frame. Like how do we overcome this challenge or how might we solve this? And a lot of the things that we even use at my job are we ask how might we questions. How might we use this opportunity or how might we overcome this complexity here? And what it does is it gets people to think about like how they may fail and the fears that come out with failing. But really there's a focus on like if we get all of these questions around what it is that we're trying to solve, then I can focus on the fact that I'm solving a business problem. I'm not fearful of it. I just have a challenge in front of me that is really focused on these particular things. So I think like thinking about fears as not things that I want to induce for anxiety, but like this is a plot that I have to overcome. This is a problem that I have to overcome. And this is going to be how I'm going to focus on it.
When you think about how a certain workplace feels, like whether it's like a thriller, like always urgent, or like a drama where it's slower and more reflective, do you find that companies switch sometimes between those genres? Or is it kind of like, this is our company, this is how we operate, and you need to just work on that? Or how do you find those?
I love that. I feel like companies fall in a mixture of everything. I think some companies like especially if they're larger organizations, they tend to be like more top down, which can feel like a thriller, can feel like very like militant of I'm being told what to do. I find that more like tech companies, they want to feel like innovative and collaborative. And so that might feel like almost fictional and fantasy in a way. And so I think it's like, it depends one on like the product or your mission, but it also depends on like where you are in your project. So you might, in some cases, have to be a little bit more top down because maybe you have a goal that you have to get done really, really quickly and you don't really have time for like consensus driven decision making. And I think in that point, yes, it could feel like a thriller a little bit, but as long as you have this insightful and resolution and an insightful ending that you're coming to. Whereas other points, right, you might have a new challenge that you're taking on and you want it to feel like a fantasy and you want it to feel like this adventure or drama because you have this new challenge. You know that you're going to overcome it, but maybe I want to take my team on this ride. And I think it just depends on where you are with the project.
Absolutely. So let's talk about directing with vision, not control. So, what's the difference between directing a team and controlling one?
I think control comes out from this, common mistake that many leaders make, which is micromanaging. I don't think people intentionally want to micromanage. I think it comes out as a fear that people have of wanting to know every single progress point because they have this stress of wanting things to go right. I think the reality is that there is no such thing as control. Like we actually don't really have complete control over every single outcome, right? And so what you really want to do with your team is like inspire them to bring about this vision. In this vision, it could go wrong. That's just the reality of life. But that's okay as long as your team is able to pivot and adjust from that challenge. And so I think like that's why it's super important to like get out of this mindset of I need to be able to know every single outcome and control every single outcome because it's just not realistic. It's not. We don't control any of that. Some of these outcomes come about from essentially just pivoting and like taking on a challenge head on and being inspired by how to problem solve from it. And so I think as long as leaders can get away from the micromanagement and really like actually directing, inspiring your teams to be collaborative, I think you'll come out with the most like impactful project that you want.
I agree 1,000% with all of that. And as you saw from my reaction, that's a pain point for me still. This is sensitive, very sensitive topic. But
For all of us.
I know, it's God, it's such a but one thing that you said that kind of stuck with me for a second was the idea that the person just wants it to be done right, but also understanding that in certain industries or positions or companies, there's more than one right way.
Yeah.
The goal is a quality output, right? Sometimes it doesn't matter every single step being taken a certain way. If we get there and it's ethical and moral, and then okay.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think it takes like a level of humility to realize that my approach may not be the right approach. And even though it feels right in my head, someone else could achieve the same thing in a completely different way. And I think it's like, that's why it's important to like state the mission, right? And like the how you get there is less important as long as the mission gets accomplished.
Absolutely. So, you said editing is like post production, right? So, how can reflection and feedback become a creative process rather than a punitive one?
Oh, I love that. So I think if we think about directing in film and TV, the whole goal of editing is to get the fluff, right, and the flaws out of your project so that you have a polished project at the end. And I think a lot of times when directors are editing and cutting, they have a lot of imperfect moments where actors might go off trail, they might lose their line, et cetera. And sometimes they even keep those in.
Those are the best parts.
Exactly, exactly, because it creates the character. And oftentimes, what directors will do is show the edits to the actors, right? So that they can improve on that. So I think the same thing is true in organizations as a leader is that to use retros as your moment to edit, as your moment for post production, right? You will gather the feedback that says, these are the things that went really well about our production. These are the things that, like, could use a little bit of work. And these are the flaws that happen, but maybe I'm okay with those flaws. And here's why those flaws happen. And I think it allows for leaders to just have a moment to figure out what the polished project looks like. But also, like, editing comes with every project. Retros come with every project. Feedback is how you're growing as an organization. And I think keeping that at the forefront is critical.
When do you know it's time to rewrite the script? So, and in order to evolve the culture and not just manage it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think the moment that you realize that your script is confused in its plot point, meaning that you're not really getting the resolution that you had initially imagined, or that you're trying to build too many plots at the same time that are telling conflicting stories, right? And so, like, what that looks like in an organization is that you might say, I might work on a project that says, I want to get X amount of students in college. And perhaps I do that, but maybe part of that is that I'm actually focusing on getting students into their career as opposed to college. Like, is it more important for students to actually go through the traditional realm of college, or are we really preparing them for something much larger, right? Does it matter if they get this traditional college mode or not? And I think, like, it's really important to get crisp and clear on, like, what's the story that you want to tell and the plot that you want to tell. And maybe it's not just college readiness. Maybe that's an avenue that you're exploring, but, like, perhaps it's like, I want to get people who may not be able to afford traditional college into their career, or I want to develop them so that if they don't have a traditional career, like, what are the pathways that they can pursue to, contribute to society at large? And I think when you realize that all of those things are conflicting, then I think there's a moment that I'm saying, okay, I need to pause and really get clear about what's my plot. Maybe it is all three things, but not at the same time. Maybe I'm doing this plot and this story first, and then I switch to this one, and then I go to another one. And that's okay. Is to, like, separate your stories out. But I think, like, if your end goal is no longer becoming clear and blurred, then you're like, all right, I need to pivot really quickly and just rethink this story at large.
So, for leaders who feel the pressure to get it perfect, how do you remind them that good direction is iterative?
Yeah, 'cause we don't meet any leaders like that, right? Like, no one feels that. Yeah. I I think for leaders who feel the pressure to get it perfect, the reality is, that's just an unrealistic outcome, right? There's no such thing as a perfect product. And so I think really the goal is focusing your problem at what is tangible, what are the things that are in my control, and what are the outcomes that would be ideal, and the things that are kind of like, a little bit more realistic. And I think trying to bucket out what your end goals are, both in like what's idealistic, you can shoot for the stars versus what's realistic, will help you to kind of center your expectations around perfectionism of like, yeah, I'm going to shoot for the star, but I may not get there. And here's what actually might happen instead. And that's okay. Right. And so I think like framing different outcomes and thinking about different possibilities is what leaders should put into practice, right? Like directors do this all the time. They want to shoot $1 million film with a 20,000 budget. And it's like, yeah, if I could shoot for the stars, I would bring all of these stories together, but here's what's more realistic. And here's how I have to change my narrative with like the limited budget that I have.
Amazing. And I can just personally relate because I'm the type of person I love, like planning is almost a comfort thing for me. Like, but I always understand the importance of flexibility, meaning like, look, is this going to happen this way? No. And do I need to be adaptable for when that challenge comes? Absolutely.
100%. We're all perfectionists.
So I always like to end with a signature resolution question because this is the resolution room. So when the credits roll and the lights come up in your own life and leadership, what does resolution look like to you?
Oh, I love that. I think for me, resolution is how I make people feel. And I do get really clear about not just like the titles that I have, but what is the problem that I'm trying to solve. And I think what I have found is that when the lights are off, the problem that I want to solve and what makes me feel whole is that I want everyone to feel understood. And so that's why it's really important that we're thinking about, or I'm so cognizant about character development and the story that I want to tell, because ultimately everyone should be seen and heard. And I think that's what drives me at the end of the day is that storytelling is important because it gives people an opportunity to be on the stage for a little bit. And that is what lights me up and what lights my world up.
And can you let everyone know where to follow you in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a couple of different places. Instagram, Cherise Lesesne is my Instagram. And also I have a Substack, Chaos in My Cup, where I decode TV and film themes.
Oh, fun. Well, thank you so much for just a creative lens on leadership. Like, this was such a fun conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I had a great time.
My pleasure. Cherise reminds us that leadership, like film, is a creative act, one that requires courage, clarity, and collaboration. Every decision, every policy, every meeting is part of the story we're shaping together. As leaders, the goal isn't to control the scene, it's to direct with purpose and trust your team to bring the story to life. Because when people feel seen, trusted, and guided, they don't just follow, they co-create. Thank you for joining me in the Resolution Room. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, please consider sharing it with someone else who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show. It really helps more people find these conversations. You can explore our wearable wisdom collection at the Mind Shop or visit lowinsights.com to learn more about our work and upcoming projects. All of the details are in the show notes below. And until next time, keep building in the quiet because that's what will carry you forward.